The dinner table was set for 18 people, and I was the only one who hadn't touched my food. The centerpiece was a spray of white chrysanthemums my mother had ordered from a florist in Mississauga. $37 a stem she'd mentioned twice, and they were dying already under the restaurant's heat lamps, petals curling inward at the edges the way things do when they've been asked to perform beauty longer than they can sustain it. My father sat at the head of the table in a new blazer he'd bought for the occasion. He was laughing. Across from me at the far end, my Nana Praveen sat with both hands folded on the tablecloth, her untouched glass of sparkling water sweating rings onto the linen. She was watching me. She'd been watching me since the moment my mother had said it. Her voice carrying over the restaurant noise, over the clinking of glasses, loud enough for the adjacent table to pause their conversation. Still renting, Zara? At 34? The chrysanthemums kept curling. Nobody said anything. Welcome to Calm Revenge Tales. I'm glad you found this channel. We tell stories here about quiet people who waited, and what happened when the waiting was finally over. If that's the kind of story you need today, subscribe before we go any further. Justice doesn't always announce itself, but it always arrives. My name is Zara Murtaza, and I am a licensed structural engineer. I have been one for 9 years. I specialize in foundation assessments for commercial properties, the kind of work that requires you to look at what's holding everything up before you decide what's worth building on top of it. I did not inherit a career. I did not inherit a down payment, a cosigner, a safety net, or a single piece of furniture. I moved to Toronto at 22 with 2 suitcases, and the understanding that no one was coming to help me, which is a very clarifying thing to understand at 22. I rented for 12 years. I was good at it. I knew which landlords responded on Saturdays, how to read a lease for the clauses that would cost you later, how to keep a unit in better condition than I'd found it. I had one savings account I did not touch and one I contributed to every month without exception. The way my Nana Praveen had taught me, in the kitchen of her apartment in Scarborough, over cups of kawa and a ledger she kept in a purple composition notebook with her handwriting so small it looked like a code. Nana Praveen was my mother's mother. She was 81 years old, 5 feet tall, and the sharpest person in any room she entered. A fact the room rarely noticed, because she'd learned decades ago to let people talk. She had come to Canada in 1978 with my grandfather, who died 2 years later. She had raised 3 children in a 2-bedroom apartment. She had worked as a seamstress, then as an alteration specialist at a department store, then as a private tailor to women who paid well and tipped nothing. She had, in 47 years, never asked a single member of our family for money. My mother called her frugal in the tone people use when they mean something less flattering. I called her every Sunday. We cooked together on the phone, she in Scarborough, me in my rented apartment on Dovercourt Road. And she would tell me the exact measurements for her lamb karahi, the ratio of tomatoes to fat, the moment you add the garam masala when the oil begins to separate, and I would write everything down in my own notebook, and she would say, write it smaller, Zara, so it all fits. My parents had not visited Nana Praveen in 14 months, when my father's retirement dinner was announced. The invitation came by group text. Dinner at Saffron Garden, the nicest Pakistani restaurant in Mississauga. Dress nicely. Come prepared to celebrate. There was a second text to me alone from my mother. Please don't bring up anything uncomfortable. This is your father's night. I stared at that text for a long time. I knew what uncomfortable meant. It meant, don't mention that we haven't seen her. Don't mention that she's been taking the bus to her medical appointments alone. Don't mention the fact that she called you last February, when it was -19, because the heat in her unit had stopped working and she didn't know who to call. I asked my mother if Nana Praveen had been invited. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. She's been invited. She may not come. You know how she is. I didn't know how she was. I knew how they were about her. I called Nana Praveen that evening. She said she was planning to come. She said she had a new shower kameez she'd been saving. She said your father worked hard. It's right to celebrate him. Then she said very quietly, "Will you sit with me, Zara?" I told her I'd pick her up. The restaurant was warm and loud and expensive in the way that announces itself through the menu font. My parents had reserved a private dining room. 17 members of my extended family filled it, and they had arranged the seating with the precision of people who have thought very carefully about who should be visible. Nana Perveen and I were at the end nearest the kitchen. I noticed this. I said nothing. The food came in waves. My mother had pre-ordered biryani seekh kebab, 3 kinds of naan, lamb chops at $52 a plate. And everyone ate and talked and toasted my father, who beamed and gestured and was genuinely a man who had worked hard for 31 years and deserved to be celebrated. I watched him and felt that. I want to be clear about that part. It was during the second course that my cousin Farrak, who is 29 and works in finance and has the confidence of someone who has never been wrong about anything in his own estimation, leaned across the table and asked me how the apartment search was going. I said I wasn't searching. He said, "Still renting then?" And before I could answer, my mother's voice came from 4 seats away, carrying the question again like she'd been waiting for an opening. "Still renting, Zara? At 34? The table went quiet. Not completely. People kept eating, kept reaching for naan, but the particular frequency of the room changed. My Uncle Rashid's hand paused on his water glass. My Aunt Saima looked at her plate. My father said, not unkindly but not quietly enough, she should have let us help her when she had the chance. We offered. They had offered, once 5 years ago, when the offer came attached to conditions I will not detail here except to say they involved a different city, a different job, and weekly dinners at their house. I had declined. My mother said, "It's just, at your age with your salary." Nana Perveen's voice was soft. "Leave her, Manaz." My mother said, "Amma, no one asked you." The table heard it. My cousin Farrak looked at his food. My Aunt Saima closed her eyes for 1 full second. Nobody spoke. Nana Perveen set down her fork. She folded her hands in her lap. And she said, with a precision that was worse than anger, "Then perhaps I'll go." My mother said that would be fine. I put my napkin on my plate. I helped Nana Perveen with her chair. I picked up her bag, which was the small beaded one she brought to occasions she'd decided mattered. I said goodnight to my father, who looked, for just a moment, like a man who wanted to say something and could not locate the words. His hands went still on the tablecloth. I chose to walk out. I want to be exact about that. I was not expelled. I left because the alternative was staying in a room where my grandmother had just been told, in front of 18 people, that her presence was optional. That is not a room I was willing to be in. We got into my car. Nana Perveen sat in the passenger seat and straightened her dupatta and said, "The lamb chops were very good." I laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that takes something with it when it goes. The next 18 months were arithmetic. My spare bedroom became her bedroom. I rearranged my home office into the living room alcove and bought a second desk for $140 from Facebook Marketplace. Her medical appointments were on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I restructured my remote work schedule around them. Groceries for 2 cost more than groceries for 1. About $380 a month instead of $210. I stopped taking on weekend consulting work, which had been bringing in roughly $800 a month extra, because she needed someone home. I did not complain about any of this. I'm not reporting it for sympathy. I'm reporting it because precision matters, and I want the record to be complete. My mother called twice. The first call was an invitation to eat dinner. "Just come. You don't have to bring her," which I declined without explanation. The second call came 6 weeks later. My mother said, in the tone of someone presenting a solution, "There's a very nice facility in Brampton. Government subsidized. She'd have her own room." I said I would pass that along. I did not pass it along. In the kitchen, Nana Perveen taught me to make her lamb karahi from memory, the measurements now inside my hands instead of only in the notebook. She taught me her embroidery stitch, a chain stitch so small it looked like printed fabric. She was working on something she wouldn't show me. A piece of cloth she kept folded in a cotton bag on her nightstand, which she brought out only when she thought I wasn't watching. I noticed the cloth 3 times without asking. I wrote in my notebook, "Purple, small figures, something geometric." I didn't know what it was yet. One Tuesday in November, at her cardiologist appointment, Dr. Nkechi Mensah told us that Nana Praveen's mitral valve was deteriorating faster than expected. She laid out 3 options with the careful language of someone who has learned to give people the shape of a choice when the choices have already narrowed significantly. Nana Praveen listened to all 3 options. Then she asked the doctor how long the longest one would take. Dr. Mensah said, "Up to 2 years, with the right care and without undue stress." Nana Praveen nodded. She said, "Then we have time. If you've been waiting to see how this ends, and you want the rest of the story to find you, subscribe now. We're almost to the part where everything that was taken gets returned, and then some." On a Thursday in March, 7 months later, Nana Praveen did not come to breakfast. I don't want to linger here too long. She had gone quietly in the night, in a room that was warm and clean and familiar. The window faced east. The first light that morning was the particular amber of early spring in Toronto, and it fell across the cotton bag on her nightstand. And I sat with her for a long time before I called anyone. I called my mother last. 3 weeks after the funeral, a letter arrived from a law firm on Bay Street called Oduya, Marchetti and Partners. The partner handling the matter was named Genevieve Lalonde. She asked if I could come to the office the following Tuesday. She said it concerned the estate of Praveen Akhtar Murtaza. I brought the cotton bag. I don't know exactly why. It had been on the nightstand and then in my hands, and I'd been carrying it the way you carry things you don't yet understand. The conference room at Oduya, Marchetti and Partners had a long glass table and a view of the lake. My parents were already there when I arrived. My mother looked at the bag in my hands, and then away. My father's posture was the posture of a man bracing for a long meeting. Genevieve Lalonde had the manner of someone who has delivered news of many kinds, and has learned to do it without editorializing. She set a document on the table, 43 pages tabbed. She said that Praveen Murtaza had maintained a portfolio of investments since 1991, managed through a private wealth advisor at a firm in Scarborough. She said the estate's total value, after probate, was $2.3 million. My mother's chair made a sound against the floor. My father said, "That's not, she was a seamstress." Genevieve Lalonde said that she had been a seamstress who had invested $50 a month beginning in 1983, then $200 a month after 1991, in a diversified equity portfolio, and had not touched the principal in 42 years. She said the compound growth on a consistent long-term position of that nature, over that period, was, and she paused here with the neutrality of a person who knows that numbers speak, $2.3 million. My mother said, "She never told us." My Aunt Sima, who I had not noticed until this moment, was sitting in the corner of the room. She had come as moral support, I assume. Her eyes were wet. She looked at her hands. Genevieve Lalonde opened the document to the tabbed section marked Distribution, and said that Praveen Murtaza had left specific instructions. There were bequests to 3 charities: a women's sewing collective in Scarborough, a cardiac care fund at Sunnybrook Hospital, and a scholarship at the University of Toronto for first-generation engineering students. The remainder, $1.84 million, had been left in its entirety to Zara Murtaza, designated in the will as the one who stayed. My mother made a sound I had not heard from her before. It was not grief, exactly. It was recognition. My father looked at the window. I reached into the cotton bag and placed the folded cloth on the glass table. I opened it carefully. It was an embroidered piece, the size of a pillowcase, in the chain stitch she'd taught me, depicting a row of small buildings with windows, and below them, a figure smaller than the buildings, standing steady. In the bottom corner, in her handwriting so small it looked like a code, she had embroidered 4 words. "She keeps the receipts." My parents had used those words against her once, years ago, At a dinner I hadn't been at. Nana Perveen keeps every receipt, they'd said, as if it were an eccentricity, evidence of anxiety, proof that she'd never fully trusted the abundance she was living inside. She had heard it, and she had stitched it into cloth and left it for me. I looked at my mother and I said, she said to write it small, so it all fits. My parents' lawyer, a man named Clifton who had been sitting silently in the corner, leaned over and said something quietly to my father. My father nodded very slowly. The following week, I received a call from my mother asking if there was any possibility the will could be contested. I told her I had already spoken with Genevieve Lalonde, and that my grandmother had been assessed as fully competent, had signed the will 3 years prior, and had a notarized letter of intent on file. I said, if you want to proceed, that's your decision. They did not proceed. I made one offer. I called my father, not my mother, my father, and I said that Nana Perveen had left me more than I needed, and that if he wanted to talk about what that meant for the family, I was willing to have that conversation. He said he'd call me back. He has not called back. That was 4 months ago. I am not waiting. I used $480,000 of the inheritance as a down payment on a building, a 4-unit property on a street in Scarborough, 7 minutes from where Nana Perveen had lived for 47 years. I am a structural engineer. I assessed the foundation myself. It is solid. The scholarship in her name received its first recipient in September. A girl from Mississauga, first in her family to study engineering. I don't know her name. I don't need to. On Sunday mornings I still cook her lamb karahi. The ratio of tomatoes to fat is fixed in my body now. I heat the oil until it shimmers. I add the ginger and garlic. I wait for the tomatoes to break down completely before I touch anything else. And when the oil begins to separate at the edges, that particular moment, that precise signal that everything is ready, I add the garam masala, and the smell that fills my kitchen is not a memory. It is a fact. She is in the room with me. She never really left. The word renting was supposed to diminish me. It became, in a document signed 3 years before that dinner, the reason I inherited everything. If someone came to mind while you listened to this, someone quiet, someone steady, someone who keeps the receipts, call them today. Not tomorrow. Today. Tell them you see what they've been building. Share this story with someone who needs it. Leave a comment with 1 word for a person like Nana Perveen. And subscribe, so the next story finds you the moment it's ready. I'll see you in the next one.